Daniel's strumming his guitar in the park when Phyllis appears. She carries on about how good he is as her son cringes. Talk soon turns to how good things are going for her. Daniel wants details. Phyllis can't say anything yet, but soon he'll want to write a song about the world opening up for her. And you? It was one of those days in Genoa City where the tension didn't just hum beneath the surface. It rattled like a freight train barreling down the tracks with no brakes. And if there was one person who recognized the sound of disaster before anyone else, it was Victoria Newman. The morning had started like any other for her. Coffee at Newman Enterprises. A polite but pointed exchange with Nate Hastings about quarterly numbers, and a stern phone call with her father about an acquisition deal. But when she overheard two staff members whispering in the hallway, hushed voices, carrying just enough detail about the merger, disaster, and Chancellor Winters pulling out, she knew something was terribly wrong. Victoria's instincts kicked in. A few discreet calls later, she pieced together enough of the situation to realize that Lily Winters was being cornered into signing a rushed contract with a rival company. The terms were stacked against Chancellor Winters in ways that could gut the business and cost dozens of employees their jobs. Worse still, word was that Billy Abbott had been feeding confidential details to an unnamed ally, a move that sounded exactly like Billy when he got swept up in his latest crusade to save someone. Victoria wasn't just thinking about the corporate fallout. She knew how quickly this kind of deal could spiral into personal vendettas. And in Genoa City, corporate vendettas had a way of destroying families, relationships, and, if history was any indication, lives. She didn't have time for niceties. She called Lily directly. "Don't sign anything," Victoria said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Lily's tone was cool but defensive. "I can handle my own company, Victoria." "This isn't about handling it," Victoria replied. "This is about survival. That contract is a train wreck in motion, and you're standing in the middle of the tracks." Lily hesitated just long enough for Victoria to know she'd gotten through. "Meet me at Society in 30 minutes. Bring whatever you've got." Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Romalotti was pacing the floor of his apartment like a man who had seen a ghost. Or worse, a truth that couldn't be unseen. The evidence sat in his inbox. An encrypted file from a source he hadn't spoken to in years. He'd thought it was spam at first, but when he opened it, he wished he hadn't. Inside were records, emails, text messages, and financial transfers. That painted a picture of someone manipulating half the town's power players for their own gain. And at the center of it, woven through like a spider's web, was his own mother, Phyllis Summers. The problem wasn't that Phyllis was in over her head. That was practically her comfort zone. The problem was that this time, she was tangled up with people who played dirtier than even she could. If she kept going, she wouldn't just ruin her own life, she'd pull everyone around her into the fallout. Daniel had spent most of his life trying to untangle himself from his mother's chaos. But blood was blood, and if there was one thing he knew, it was that Phyllis didn't back down until she had no other choice. That meant he'd have to shock her into stopping before it was too late. He grabbed his jacket, marched out the door, and headed straight for the Grand Phoenix Society, a meeting of titans. By the time Victoria slid into the booth across from Lily, she'd already printed out the relevant clauses from the proposed contract, annotated in red ink like a professor grading a particularly sloppy essay. Clause 1 to be, Victoria said, sliding the papers across the table. "It allows them to dissolve the joint venture at will, taking proprietary assets with them. That's your tech division." Lily frowned, scanning the page. "This wasn't in the draft I saw last week. They slipped it in after your last review," Victoria said. "They're hoping you won't notice until it's too late." Lily's jaw tightened. "And you're telling me this out of concern for Chancellor Winters?" Victoria didn't flinch. "I'm telling you this because I know what it's like to be blindsided. You can think what you want about me, but I don't want to watch another company go up in flames because someone thinks they can play hero." It was a jab aimed squarely at Billy, and Lily knew it. Still, she couldn't deny the evidence in front of her. "All right," Lily said. "I'll hold off. But I want to know how you found out." Victoria leaned back, a faint smile on her lips. "Let's just say I make it my business to know when the trains are about to crash." Grand Phoenix, the dire warning Phyllis was at the lobby bar, sipping a martini and casually charming a guest into extending their stay. She spotted Daniel the moment he walked in. He had that look, the one that said he wasn't here for small talk. "Sweetheart," she greeted, air kissing his cheek. "To what do I owe this?" "Cut it," Daniel said sharply, pulling her aside. We need to talk. Now. Phyllis bristled at the tone. Excuse me. Daniel didn't lower his voice. I know what you're doing. I know about the money transfers. I know about the fake accounts. And I know you're in bed, figuratively, I hope with people who could bury you 6 feet under without blinking. Phyllis froze, her eyes narrowing. Where are you getting this from? It doesn't matter. Daniel shot back. What matters is you stop. Right now. Walk away before it's too late. She scoffed, crossing her arms. You think you can waltz in here and tell me to drop everything without giving me a reason? Daniel's voice softened, but his words hit like a hammer. Because if you don't, Mom, I'll be the one who hands the evidence over to the police. That landed. For a moment, Phyllis's mask cracked, the color draining from her face. She searched his expression for any hint of bluff, but found none. You wouldn't, she whispered. Daniel met her gaze. Try me. The collisions to come while Victoria was intercepting one disaster, Daniel was trying to avert another, and, though the two crises seemed unrelated, Genoa City had a way of turning parallel lines into intersecting ones. Word of Victoria's intervention spread quickly. Billy, predictably, was furious that she'd interfered with his plan to push Lily into action. His frustration only grew when he realized that his supposed ally, the one feeding him intel, had suddenly gone silent. That silence was no coincidence. No coincidence. The shadowy figure pulling strings behind the scenes had decided to regroup, sensing that too many people were now sniffing around their plans. Unfortunately for Phyllis, she was already tied too tightly to this puppet master to walk away clean. Back at the Grand Phoenix, Daniel left without waiting for his mother's response. Phyllis stood alone at the bar, her martini untouched, the weight of his warning settling over her like a shroud. She wasn't used to being on the receiving end of threats from her own family, especially not from her son. And though she would never admit it out loud, part of her was afraid. Victoria, on the other hand, left society feeling victorious, at least for now. She'd stopped one train from derailing, but she could still hear the rumble of others on the tracks. The question was, how many wrecks could she prevent before she ran out of time? Late that night in his apartment, Daniel sat staring at the file on his laptop. He'd done what he could, but he knew his mother too well to think she'd drop it completely. Phyllis had a way of convincing herself that the rules didn't apply to her, that she could dance with fire and never get burned. Victoria, meanwhile, was back at Newman Enterprises, combing through merger reports and acquisition rumors, looking for patterns. She didn't believe in coincidences. The same names kept popping up in different deals, always at the center of the chaos. And if she was right, the puppet master behind Lily's near catastrophe and Phyllis's dangerous entanglements might be one and the same. The next morning would bring more revelations, more confrontations, and more questions. But for now, two people, a determined businesswoman and a protective son, had each thrown themselves in front of oncoming trains. The problem was, in Genoa City, there was always another one coming. Thanks for watching this video, and please subscribe our Update World 24 YouTube channel for more update news.